think that that is recording. Just bear with me for a second. Yeah, it is. So you know what they say about a little knowledge is a dangerous thing? I've taken deep dives into video production. I thank you for not acting so completely blown away that that would even be necessary with the level of professionalism that I bring to this. But no, actually, in all seriousness, I've been trying to up my video game, and so each week I'm learning a little bit more, and then it's like adding layers upon layers of information and stuff that just like complicate things, you know? Sorry, someone was going to say there. Yes, knowledge brings problems. Well, that brings us to our practice, actually. Today's practice, and I mentioned in the email that I goofed and didn't have enough memory. I think I figured that out. You watch, I'll probably at the end of this I'll find out that I actually haven't solved it. But I neglected to tape our last session. My bad, but I'm going to retape it at some point and then post it so that we've got kind of the full series. But the first session of our practice a few weeks ago was standing practice. And the idea here, it's actually kind of like that little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Where that came from in terms of what I've been thinking about, like in terms of setting an intention for our practice, was really just the observation that for people who go to, or turn on the camera, as the case may be, to a led yoga or meditation class, often practice yoga or meditate, but rarely in the course of that is there an opportunity, or is there much discussion at all about why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's just and this is no big surprise there. I really I think obviously I'm a lot of a fan of these practices. I'm less of a fan of the traditional pedagogy that like teaching practice that comes out of yoga and meditation, which is very top down, very sort of undemocratic, and shall we say not informed by some advances in educational psychology, things that we've learned over the last few decades as opposed to the last few millennia. So what the intention with this series a little bit is to deal with that, like to arm you with a bit of knowledge so that maybe you have a little bit of a sense of what we're doing, or what you're doing when you're doing it, and why you might want to break these out in the course of a day. Like whether that's, I'm going to roll out my mat because I've got a sore X, like my hip is sore or whatever it is, and I think that this pose, would be nice. Or not even necessarily an intention-focused practice in that sense, but just like, maybe answering the question for and if some of you out there about like, how, why would I choose to do this pose? Like, why would I go into a warrior pose versus going into a dog pose versus going into Shavasana? Like, Shavasana is a bit easier, right? Pretty obvious that it's meant to be about relaxation, but with some of the others, at least I think it can be confusing. And so, tying back in, if I haven't completely muddled it, to my observation that I've been learning about, shooting online videos and so on, and post them on YouTube, and editing and all this other fancy schmancy stuff. I thought that we could do some of that with yoga, okay? And here's the brilliant thing about it, is if you're just like, I'm throwing that out to you and you're just like, dude, I just want to breathe and move, stop with the lesson, that's okay. Because the intention is also to just be a nice practice, okay? But it's one that we're not going to be moving through transitions very quickly at all. Instead, it's going to be a series of held poses, okay? that I'll talk us through and we can experience, and I'll give you some modifications so that you can work with them within the body that you have today. Okay, notice I didn't say the body that you have for all time, because our bodies are constantly changing. We have injuries, we have, whether that's the knees or something else. Life happens, we're tired, or whatever the case may be. So being able to change the practice up, to modify things, super, super helpful. Okay, so is that all good? Does that make sense? Is that clear? All right. So what you may want to have on that is nice but not required. A table, okay, which I've got here on a bench, or a wall, or not pictured, a chair, or what I actually, as it happens, I have today, and I don't know if this is clear on camera, I've got this. It's got yellow pages on it, don't ask, it doesn't really matter why, but this is really just a wood block, okay, which I'm going to pop onto the center of my mat. Now, if you're saying to yourself at this point, wood block, what? I don't have a wood block. You don't need a wood block. It's just it's a chair alternative, okay? I actually use this not really for yoga, but for other ways of moving my body. Like, it's really, I'm going to step out of frame, but like doing step-ups where I step up and down or jump up and down off the block and that sort of thing. But it's also anything like this, a chair or a block or a wall, will do a couple of things for us. It's going to help with balance, so that if we're in a position where we need a little balance, we've got support, or we've got support, or we've got support, okay? And they just change the poses up. One of the great misconceptions I had about chair yoga practice was that it was somehow easier. And not the case. It's actually easier than quote unquote regular or standing yoga practice. Not at all. It can actually be, particularly if you're not used to moving in that particular way, it can be quite challenging. So in any case, you have options. Let's start. I'm going to lose the glasses today. Get out of my own analytical mind. And you can start sitting, you can start standing, or you can start in a sort of in-between state. So in the last practice, the standing practice number 1, where really we did, and like I say, I'll share that down the line, we did a lot of single leg balance poses, so tree pose and eagle pose and flying pigeon and on and on from there. We didn't actually get into a lot of lunges, or a lot of, I should say, dual leg poses. The only one that we had done, I think, was a high lunge. The key one, though, and I think where we can use this as, I'm going to give you a couple of options to start. One is to find Tadasana, to find mountain pose, and I am assuming it as we speak. So if standing without support or with support makes sense, okay, although I wouldn't be doing it leaning at that point, I'd actually come in so that you're in a comfortable, you can hold, okay? That's option number 1. Option number 2 is to actually use your chair so that you are sitting, but in a raised position. And I'm actually that's how I'm gonna go, because chair pose is where we're actually gonna go next. So if you're in your mountain, if you're seated on the floor, or if you're in a chair, a supported chair, I should say, let's sit for a couple of minutes, a few minutes, just to ground the practice. He says, recognizing internally that I need this as much as you. I may need this more than some of you, but it's not a competition. Competition for grounding, okay. So if you haven't already, again, you may have noticed that if you're looking, and if you aren't, that's actually even better. That's super cool. You're focused on yourself, but I've closed my eyes. You might want to do the same, or you could just lower them. Take a couple of minutes to just inhabit your body. Take a few breaths to do that. So option here would be to start at what feels like, again, practice. This is just a different one, different than some of the others. But without looking, without your hands feeling, just draw your attention to what feels like the center of your being, of your body. So for me, that is like kind of a couple inches behind my sternum. That's kind of a convenient place in the sense that the breath really, it's a conduit. It's dropping down and then rising up. And you can let that breath center expand. Take in, shine the light of awareness into your internal landscape. Just feel your body from the inside out. Sense your mind also from the inside out, because of course our minds aren't only contained within our bodies, they're outside as well. Taking your attention right out to the edges of what feels like your container. So your skin, where your feet meet the ground, the soles of your feet. Where if your seat meets a seat, the feeling of connection there. But also the connections that exist in 360 degrees, every inch of acreage on your body, touching clothing, touching air, touching yourself in the sense skin touching skin, depending on how you folded your body. And let's just cycle. This is going to be an uber quick scan. Eyes can be open or closed, but notice your visual field. That includes if your eyes are closed, you don't need to open. Just notice the shadow. Notice light. Notice color if there's any there. Make your view wide. Make it expansive. Kind of easier to do, actually, ironically, with eyes closed, because there are no limits there. It's just a blank field. Now tie in some sound. What do you hear in your environment? Is it constant noise? Is there humming? Is there a fan? Or is the soundscape moving, shifting, and changing? Shifting that focus, that attention into smell, into taste. There may be sensation there, and there may not. And then finally, feeling of the air on our skin, feeling of our body in space. So noticing the weight of your body. Perhaps the energy within it. And then notice from here, notice the noticing. This is going to be our final stop. So if your attention, I often talk about attention as being like a spotlight, and you can move that spotlight around, just do that for a moment intentionally. Move from object to object, pausing for a moment. So, and again, you could be doing anything you want. There aren't any rules here. So I'm going to focus on the tip of my right pinky finger temperature of my left foot. The taste of the next breath. The feeling of air pressure, or any breeze that's moving through. And if it feels like you're, with me throwing those ideas out, like your attention is reaching, is stretching out to meet something, or you're actively scanning, can you simply turn that spotlight around? So rather than looking for the next object externally, look for what is looking, or who is looking. What do you see? What do you sense? And if you sense something, let me know. After you, in the chat, I sense that there's something there, it's me. I sense that there's nothing there, that's also me. All right, eyes can open up. All right. And if I was getting a little, sorry, that even just coming out of my mouth, you know, you start, those cues were meant intentionally, but it also starts to sound kind of trippy-dippy pretty quickly, but that turning awareness in on itself, practice will come back to another day. I just wanted to kind of plant the seed. So if that was interesting, cool. If that was confusing, totally okay. If it was something else, cool, awesome. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up after. Okay, so we're going to start with the first pose of our practice is chair pose. Okay, now I'm actually, as it happens, I'm in a chair right now, and if you'd like to start by putting your seat in a seat, that's not a bad place to start. And if you want to actually start standing in a chair, okay, like in a non-seated chair, that's okay too. But it's nice to have a little bit of support, okay? So, chair pose. By the way, so a little rationale, why would we use chair? When we're practicing yoga, and you can, again, if you're seated, we can actually bring our arms back in space, extending our shoulders. This is extension, okay? And this is flexing when we bring our shoulders up. Ooh, I've got someone coming in. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so we can just get situated, okay? Seated up on the forward part of our sitting bones, if you are seated. Sweep the arms back. Sweep them up and forward. And feel that action through the kind of mid-center of your back. Might even look up to your hands. Exhale. Sweep back. Ooh, nice little crack there. And then inhale. Sweep forward. And really feel like you're growing up through the sides of your body. Okay, not thrusting the chest open too much, so keeping things contained. And then sweep back. Okay, and hands can come to center. And then from here, if we're seated, you could play with coming up a couple of inches. So just coming up into a little chair pose. Sanskrit for this pose is Utkatasana, which, like I said, is just a fancy way of saying chair pose. Okay, if that becomes, and this is going to work the fronts of your legs a fair bit. If that becomes too much, have a seat. Okay. And then we'll come up into our chair. And then begin to shift your weight. You might want to use a hand on the wall. Shift your weight into your right foot and begin to lift the left foot just an inch off the ground. And just so that you can do this balancing on one-legged chair. And then the other, and if again, I'll just demo this, you can hold on. And up. And down. And seated. By the way, so why would we do a chair? it is a wonderful warming pose, as opposed to Tadasana, where you're much more stacked and you can stay for time. You'll notice here that this is going to generate heat. I once taught a class at 7 in the morning and the thermostat had broke, so it was like 55 degrees Celsius in the space we were practicing in. And the way I solved that problem was to get everyone against the wall. So I'll move back here. This is a kind of a good way of demonstrating it. And just to sit down with your back against the wall and press your back and your head in. And then sit in your chair. And that becomes interesting, shall we say, rather quickly. Okay. The other reason that I kind of like chair is all of the different things we can do with this. So come back up into your mountain, okay, just because it becomes quite tiring to be there, okay? And I hope that we're breathing through this, we're staying with our breath, so nice and long and relaxed. So from your mountain, you'll notice that we can play with our feet. Now I don't know that this is gonna come across on the video because of the distance, but we'll see what we do here. Okay, we can do is spread all of our toes, okay, and then lift all 10 toes up. Now, careful, you may want support because once the toes come up, even just regular standing becomes can become quite challenging, okay? Bring your weight back into your heels. Okay, arms can be forward, arms can be up, okay? And then try to put your big toes only down. Sit your seat back. Bring your pinky toes down. Put your middle toes up. And if you're like, what is with all of these toes? Then all the toes can go down and bring your heels up into an elevated chair. And release out of that. And then let's give ourselves a counter stretch. So I'm going to go out, I guess that we've got a fair bit of buildup of tension in the fronts of our legs. So one thing, again, not a pose, just feels nice, is just to actually, yeah, just tight out the muscles, okay? And then option here, one of two options, either is to come into a low lunge, so just dropping one knee down and bringing the leg back in order to stretch the front of the thigh. That's the one I'm going to show on this side, okay? So I've taken my right hip back in space, my left knee forward, and arms can come up if you want, and really reaching with the hand of the backward leg will tend to open that front of the hip up, okay? So there's a counter stretch. On the other side, here's the other option, and again, you could do this with support, particularly if balance is an issue at all. We're reaching for the front of the ankle, bringing the knee back, and really trying to open up this front where I'm touching, this front angle of the hip. So I guess what I mean there is, the heel comes towards your sitting bone. If you bend over like this, we're not really actually stretching anything. So really what it's about is keeping your head and chest up and then taking your knee back and breathing. And we'll let that go. And then just shaking both legs out, maybe giving your arms a little shake. So thoughts on that? Why chair pose? It's the start of a series called Dancing Warrior, and we're going to be working with warriors today. That's why the placement. The other thing is that chair pose, as opposed to mountain, which is very sort of like an anatomically neutral position. So I'm in our mountain pose here, and you can be there. Feel the difference of this. Okay, feel this compared to your chair. And I've got a question for you. In which position do you feel more naturally ready? Ready for whatever comes next? Assuming that whatever comes next could be Warrior 1, or it could be putting something into a shopping cart. So is it Tadasana, mountain pose, or is it, as I sit back, Utkatasana, chair pose? See this chair pose, what do you think? Any thoughts out there? Where do you feel? Yeah, right? Why, it doesn't need to have a reason, but any sense of why chair pose for you? that's really good feedback, right? If you find a pose like that and it's giving you some relief in, in a particular area, then more of that. And similarly, if you come into a pose like that I'm throwing your way and you're like, ooh, not that, come back to a more restful one. I mean, the other thing is, we're here, if you think about it, it's very much like a ready position, okay? Like you're ready to move in lots of different directions. So, okay. In any case, we can move, let's one final time, we'll just shake all that out. And we'll come into our chair, and then we're going to transition. So again, this could be with a hand on something or not. I'm going to actually do it with a hand just to demo it on the first side. Lift your right foot up, take it back, and you can actually look, yeah, so go slowly, okay? And if that, one-legged transition doesn't work, fully hand on, step back with purpose, and we're just going to set up the base. Now, a word about, thank you, Henry, for blocking my feet. A word about our warrior poses. I had mentioned last week or the last practice, the physical practice when we did this, that this, which I'm going to show you, a lunge position. So the big difference here is in the lunge, our hips are fairly square, our feet are straight ahead, and so this is a much more accessible pose. So if you've ever done warrior poses and found that with the back foot turned out, so I'm going to really step out and show you if you want to take a peek at me. So if we're going to move into, this is warrior one, okay? Now, we'll say more and practice more with the warriors as we go through, but general setup, okay, I'm going to just deal with feet, and we're going to build the pose up. So really taking the sort of power into the back edge of the back foot and turning, it's going to vary by person, but in general it would be on average about 45-degree angle, okay? So not like this, not like a lunge, but kind of in between. And really taking the effort into your back edge and feeling that come up the line of your leg so that the natural arch in your foot can be pulling away from the mat, okay? And then we'll step the other foot in. So again, I can build this up with a little block here at the side. I'm here, I step in, I bring the heel of my left foot roughly into line with the side of the ankle on the other side, and then bring the hands to the waist. And you'll notice that I'm actually turned out to about, if the front of my mat is 12 o'clock, my hips are at about 2 o'clock, okay? And let's just be here for a moment, okay? You might want to lengthen the stance out, okay? So if it's not feeling deep enough, we're here. If it's feeling too deep, maybe you come up, you're here, okay? It's going to vary on the individual. And just play with that for a minute. Just rocking forward back into your leg. Careful of that knee Wendy, right? Okay? Accentuating the press back through the back edge of the back foot. Breathe here. Hands on your hips. And then what we're going to do, we're not going to worry as much about our waist, about our hips. What we're going to do is take our shoulders and as much as possible, square them to the front of our mat. That is going to have the natural, no, don't lose that press back through that back foot, but you'll notice that if you do that, you can keep your hands on your hips. They're going to turn slightly forward, but still, my back hip, it's more like 1/4 to 1 on that clock. You're getting a nice, at least the opportunity for a stretch through the groin and through the back hip, shoulders square, and then from here, we can inhale and bring the arms up. Breathe. And this is warrior one. Now, if the hands come together, cool. If they do not, they're separated. If having our arms up is too much, arms can be out. Arms can be forward. Arms can be back. Notice I'm saying arms can be. So you might be cycling through, okay, sweeping the palms together, bringing the hands up, maybe allowing them to drop, a final pose, and taking your fingers and interlacing them behind your back. Here's a version of warrior one. And then just leaning over. And hands can come down, and we step back up, our chair. Nice. And you'll notice actually too, you might notice that I stepped up to feet really close together. When we were holding chair earlier, we had feet hip distance apart. There's no demerit to either version. And so in fact, you could be in a big sumo chair like this if that feels nice. Or you can be in a tiny little, almost stool, okay? From here, let's explore the other side, understanding that the other side may feel different, okay? So, into your chair, I've chosen the narrow chair, but it could be the mid chair, it could be the big chair, okay? And then I'm gonna take my hands to my hips this time. Okay, but you can use the support of a wall or a chair. Step back, okay? And again, if that it was implied, but if it wasn't super clear, if this position with my foot turned out and toes out to the side here and hips out doesn't feel good in your body, let's not belabor it, okay? We have enough suffering in our lives, you know, most of us, most of the time, that we don't have to bring it in voluntarily onto the mat. So instead, you simply pop up into this high lunge position, and that's awesome, okay? No one gets kicked out of yoga, at least if they're doing yoga, like yoga, real yoga, for not, you know, doing it the right way. The right way to do the pose is the way that feels nice in your body, and that you can hold the pose for time, with breath, with attention, without freaking out, without needing to run away, okay? Physically, like literally, or in terms of your thoughts, okay? Hands come to your hips. Not worried about bringing too much turn in the hips. They're gonna naturally still be turned out. If we look down, we can still see the toes, especially the big toe, second toe, third toe of our forward foot. Inhale, arms rise. Virabhadrasana A, or Warrior One. Okay, I'm throwing out the Sanskrit just because I so rarely do. And maybe actually here, let's just sweep the arms back down and bring them back to our hips. Okay, because once we get in all up here into our arms, things can get kind of, you know, we're kind of funky up here. Instead, bring your hands to your hips. Okay, take breaks anytime you need to. You can just kind of step out and relax and then step back in. All right, so we're here. And then really ground back through your heel, like you're pressing your heel back, and almost like without moving forward, the feeling of like that energy springing up forward into your body. Okay, the power of this pose is in the back leg. We're really, this is like the post for our pose. And then we sweep and we come up. And then hands come down, and you can step up and find your chair. And then rise. Any questions, any comments about Warrior One? So, and as you're thinking about that, or if there is any, and if there's not, or you want to save them to the end, that's totally cool too. I said, why would you do Warrior One? For me, it's that feeling of turning my hips with that grounded, posted back leg turned out. It has a feeling of like stretching and spinning that back hip here, if that makes sense, or on the other side here. So it's just, you know, truthfully, of any of the standing poses, Warrior One is the, I would say of the three warriors, it's the one that I feel, I sometimes can feel like I'm fighting myself in the pose a little bit, like I'm like, let go of the fight. Instead, just allow the stretch to be there, and then feel the power in that post of the back leg. So any questions, any comments there? Good. Okay. Awesome. Was that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And guess. not, well, you know what, I think I understand what you're saying, and I'll let you tell me whether I understood, because what you described is something roughly that I'm going to take our group through over the next few series of poses. Yeah. The one thing I should say actually too is that in terms of a chair, now this can be a little bit tricky with a back on the chair, but if you have a stool or if you have a back, you could like turn it to the side so it's out of the way. But let me just, if you peek at me before we go into our next pose, here's warrior one. Okay, I've turned my back foot out, I've taken my front foot forward, seated. And my back hip right now is like crying at me for attention. Like this is something. Okay, there's a lot going on here. So please don't feel like if you were injured or something like that, or you can't do a lot of weight bearing in one knee or the other, something like this can go a long way. So you can see I'm taking the leg back, turning it out, and we get into versions of warrior one. Okay. Remove that. So we're going to move. Let's actually come back to our mountain. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to actually ask you to step your right foot back, what feels like part way, just like you know, a foot and a half back kind of thing. Okay, just a little bend in the front knee, and then step that foot back a little bit further. And turn your toes out. So now I'm going to step out of the way so you can see. Unlike our warrior one, we're at 45 degrees. We're moving into Virabhadrasana B, or warrior two. So you can see I've turned my toes basically parallel with the front of the mat. Okay, perpendicular to the side of the mat. There can be a slight turn forward if you want. Again, every body is going to be a little bit different, but we're there. And again, that same feeling of taking the effort into the back edge of the back foot and allowing the normal curve of the arch to pull away from the mat. Okay. Once you've got things nice and long, okay, so forward foot, forward, toes pointing towards the front of the mat. Hands can just be on our hips for now. We're going to build this pose up the same way, from the bottom up. Okay? Spread your toes. This can be enough of a challenge right here, even with our hands on an object, is just to lift our toes up and try to remain balanced. Now, the first thing I'm going to ask you to bring your attention to is if you bring your arms up, okay, or your arms are down, is where are your hips in space? Are they roughly even? So if you've dropped one hip, so you can see here I've intentionally dropped my left hip down, lift it up, okay? Or if it's, I can't really tilt it up, but if it was tilted up, tilt it down. I like to think about dropping back so that my weight, again, is centered that post of the back leg. And then the knee isn't so far forward that I've lost sight of my toes. I can still see my toes, okay? You might even lift the heel of that forward foot, okay? And really feel like you're spinning the inner thigh open, and then heel can come back down, okay? Take your hip points, and as much as you can, point them to the side of the mat. It's like I'm signaling a flight with our hips, okay? And then last thing, inhale, arms come up. And let's take our palms up, really spin the shoulders open. Keep the shoulders where they are, just spin the palms back down. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So there's that, and now as a way of transitioning, I'm not going to take you all the way to where Sue was just describing, but what you can do is take your forward hand, palm up to the ceiling, so you're turning it up, back one can stay where it is. You can drop the back arm onto the back leg. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see this in profile. So we're here, turn the arm up, drop the arm down, or tuck it in behind, it's totally up to you. And then, without losing that bend in the front knee, come back. Side stretch, open those ribs. So this is gentle warrior. And then come back to your warrior two. And then step part way, step all the way, and just give your legs a little bit of a shake. Okay. Let's
move into our opposite side. By the way, this is meant to be like, truly we can just stay in the poses. You don't have to like jump into what's next or why aren't we transitioning like we would normally do with breath or whatever. It can be if we are staying in the pose, if we're staying contained in our experience. From my perspective, sometimes we, in a fast-moving yoga class, let's step into the other side of the pose, by the way. So this would be left foot steps back part way, left foot steps back further, turn the toes out to the side, okay? Get into stance however wide or short you'd like. Turn the hips out to the side. Watch that front knee. It'll want to sneak in. Now I'm accentuating it here. I've actually dropped it in on purpose. Out. So we want the knee on the in, like it would be more even with the second toe, not on the inside of the foot. Okay? And then arms can come up. So I was just going to say that I think that one of the, there are absolutely wonderful like merits to a flowy, even fast yoga practice. But I think that it's easy to almost dissociate from what we're doing in it, as opposed to actually inhabiting a pose, like being the warrior. Okay, so there is a sort of marshaling of energy and like not in a violent way, but just like a feeling of power. Like that power lives within you and you have it, and you do, okay? Even if you're injured, even if you're tired, even if you might not be as young as you once were, there's power there. There's energy, okay? So we find our warrior pose. Oh, and see, I just took a little peek back to see where my arm was, and look where it is. It's out of alignment. That's okay. I just, whoop, and bring it back into line. Bring this one back in, spread the fingers, and breathe. Then we can drop the arm down, the back arm down, turn the front palm up, allow that back arm to slide down, don't lose the bend in the front leg, breathe into the side of the body, and then sweep back into warrior two. And then it's hands come to hips, it's a little step part way up, it's a little step all the way up, and let's cap this by sweeping the arms back and coming into our chair. We'll let that go. Okay, so we've gone through a couple there. Let me actually just see my roadmap of where we're going. Oh my, okay. Let me see here. Do we really want to do that? Well, okay. Yeah, sure. Let's move. So, no problem. When you're feeling better, please do come back soon. Okay. So good to hear your voice. Yeah, take care. Okay. So our final warrior pose is warrior. You guessed it, warrior 3. So we have our warrior 1, our warrior 2, and then warrior 3 is a single-legged standing balance. It is on the line of a more challenging pose. So here, I'm going to really suggest, unless you are experienced with this pose and are not dealing with balance issues, you're going to want a chair to start with. Okay, I'm going to bring this block in here. Now, if you had yoga blocks and you can really kind of like reach down and balance, the yoga blocks work fine too, but you can see this, a higher stand, beneficial for our purposes. Okay. Why balance or why practice warrior 3, or why practice the warriors period? I think like really it's about beyond moving your hips into different positions, okay? And that feeling of like being embodied and being, sort of powerful. The third warrior pose is, or at least can be, quite challenging. So, and it's challenging us to move our leg behind us. So how we're going to do this, okay, is to actually sit into our chair. Go figure, okay? And then hands can come down onto wherever we're gonna rest them, okay? And then from there, allow your knees and your legs to straighten. Bearing in mind, whether you have an injury or not, you can absolutely have a micro bend in your legs. So we're gonna do this first warrior. I'll show you where you might go, but to start, our practice is having our low back as flat as possible. So what we're not doing is this, like curving our back into a sort of cat pose. We want to bring our hips back in space. That's going to move the effort into the hamstrings and the back of our legs. Hands come onto our support. Stand up, okay, so that you've still got your flat back, but your legs are straight. And then lift one foot up. I'm going to lift my right foot, and I've just begun by lifting it like an inch off the ground. And then you can drop it back down. Lift the other foot up. And then place it back down. Okay? And then with that support, lift the first foot up, bend the knee, and then bring the leg back in space. You can change the position of your hands on whatever object you're using. Now, the tendency here to be what I just did on purpose, which is to open the leg out to the side, open the hip out to the side. And this is the challenge of this pose, is can you stay balanced? Can you stay roughly straight, but square your hips to the floor? So we're here. And bring your back heel up as much as is possible. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be way up here. It might be 2 inches off the ground. It might be a little bit more. So this, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither is a practice. So you can actually just play with that. And then foot comes down. Opposite side, lift the left toes, left foot. You can bend the knee, or you can simply sweep the whole leg back a little or a lot. And notice where the weight is landing in the foot of your standing leg. Can you drop it back into your heel rather than having it all come up into the ball of your foot? Okay, and then sweep the leg down. And then from here, we'll just transition through a little chair and up. And that will really turn the glutes on. So this, by the way, we often practice the hip series where we're down on the ground and bringing our hips through all of the different angles with our strap. I like Warrior 3 before that because it engages all of those muscles in the back of the hip and your butt. And so then when you get into stretching, you get a little bit more bang for your buck. It's like you've worked it and then you've released it. Now where you might go with this is ultimately, and you could move from, I would suggest progression would be 2 hands, okay, in the pose, okay, or if you watch me here, or you could try this, if you've got a wall handy, you can actually put your foot on the wall, that's a bit of support, and your hands on the chair, okay. You could ultimately move toward one hand, or hands come to prayer, or arms come out, and I'm not going to, be able to go in all directions, or they come back behind us. I'm going to switch legs. You may want to too. That's a long hold. Okay, so I'm switching to now my right is my standing leg. Tipping. Again, if you're doing this with support, that's totally cool. Arms out, or arms forward. And breathing. And so here's the thing. Let's just say for argument's sake that last version, the real tip down, squared, arms forward, no support, is like not on the horizon. It's not there today. Okay, let's actually just sweep through a chair too, just to like balance that out. That's totally okay. That's totally okay. What I would say is that for all of these poses, but Warrior 3, because it is so challenging, or at least it can be, is a good place to talk about this. which is the best play. Like sometimes people say like, oh, but I want to be able to do the pose, like the ultimate expression of it, or like the way I see people doing it in yoga videos online or something. First of all, pish posh on that, I think. Because like, I mean, unless that brings you joy, like holding yourself to what might be fairly unrealistic standards, right? Like we're leaving aside the fact that online people can, you know, they haven't got my mad video skills, but they can still, you know, Photoshop stuff or augment things, make them look, you know, maybe a bit more impressive than what people are actually capable of. The other thing is the idea of taking yourself into a pose that is agony to hold. So like holding that more full pose, not at all. That's not what we want to be. I think like where I am here with bent knee, with leg part way up, with support on a thing, and then one arm. That's a really cool Warrior 3. I dig it, okay? It's really about finding, you know, if you're within your comfort zone, which is to say, you know, let's maybe leave Warrior 3 as an example, but if I said challenge yourself with chair, and then you sat down and slumped, you're completely in your comfort zone, right? There's no challenge. If you're here and bringing your arms up, we got a bit more. If you raise up, you got a bit more. Come up on your toes, whoop, got a bit more, right? Come off one foot, right? So it's all just about exploring and finding the position that becomes challenging enough that you have to stay mindful, that you have to stay present. And it is going to allow you to really become comfortable with that discomfort until it's not discomforting anymore, which is a bit of a metaphor and a practice for the rest of our lives. Any questions about any of our warriors? So we technically did 4 there, right? Warriors 1 through 3 and the gentle warrior. All good? Maybe finding your Tadasana just to center to ground for a moment. Okay. So there are 2 remaining poses. I know there are dozens more poses that we could do, but I thought because the intention of these standing practices, these kind of primer series, was to give you a sense of some of the basic ones, the common ones that come out in a yoga practice. What I thought I would take you through the last couple would be extended side angle and triangle pose, which really kind of come out of our Warrior 2. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is let's actually move into Warrior 2. Okay? See if you can find your Warrior 2 without me cueing you into a bunch of the shapes. Okay, so I'm going to move this block here for a second so you can actually fully see me. Okay, right here. Good. And good. Warrior 2. Okay, now, triangle pose. What I'm going to actually ask you to do is shorten your stance and turn your back hip forward slightly. So rather than worrying about like getting so square to the side of your mat, feel like you're turning that back hip forward a little bit, okay? And then, can you straighten that front leg, okay? So we're there. So in other words, you're gonna sit back into your back hip. So it's a turn forward with the back hip, and the back hip goes back in space. So already here, just with my hands on my hips, I'm tucking into my front hip, and I've got at least for me right now, I've got a nice stretch in the inner thigh. Okay, so we're here, and then you can slide your hands. So this is my left leg, that is the extended leg. I could bring it down onto my thigh. I could bring it down onto my shin. You may get down to your foot or to the ground, but really here, this is where, again, if you've got your chair or you've got something to support you, so Warrior 2, okay, shift, turn, tip back, reach forward, and then hand just comes down to your block or to your chair, okay, and then you can sweep the other arm up, and now actually I can come down into forearm here. Here is our triangle pose. Okay. Breathing here. And really your focus here can be on the breath, because this pose has a way of compacting, like it opens up the one side and it sort of, you're dropping into the other, and so it can be a little bit of a funny sensation breathing here. Okay, so we're there. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is bring your hand onto your back, your right hand onto the back of your hip. We're going to do both poses on one side and then both on the other. And then bring your left knee forward. So now you could come up into your warrior two again. Okay, and then with your hands on your hips, let's bring right hand on your right hip, left hand maybe comes down onto your chair. Okay, or no need for a chair here if you don't want. Bring your forearm and place it on your front thigh, palm up. So you're in this sort of lean-to position, okay? Think about if your head is forward of your body, so like look at where you can kind of peek down, look at where your toes are. If your head's way forward, can you bring your head into line with the rest of your body? And then sweep your arm back and up and over and spin it so that your pinky finger rolls up. So we're spiraling the arm and reaching, almost like you're reaching from your hip pocket up to that pinky finger, and maybe even looking up to the ceiling. Okay, so that, breathing there, same grounding through that back heel, strengthening the arch there, breathing, 3, 2, 1. Hand can come back onto your hip, hand can come back onto your knee, warrior two, and shake those legs out. Okay. And then we'll transition to our other side. And notice I'm not even really using the mat here because I wanted to show you profile. So, setting up for your warrior two, squared hips. Okay. So this side, again, do use support. If you use support, I'm going to show just so that if you're watching later, you can see with support on one side, without on the other. Turn that back hip a little bit forward. Okay. Straighten that front knee. Totally okay to have a micro bend here. So this doesn't have to be locked out. Okay. It could be here. And then sit back into that back hip. So it's kind of like a pop. Okay. Hips turn forward, but drop back in space. And now we've got the option or the ability to get a little bit of a stretch through here. And you might even reach forward. I can reach and actually touch the wall there. And then hand can come down. It could be on the leg. It could be on a support. It might be on the ground. Opposite arm can come up. And if this bothers your neck to look up, don't look up. Look down. Or look sideways. Okay. And then from here, I'm going to bring that hand, and I'm trying to give transitions that are a little bit gentler on the body. So hand on the back hip for a bit of support. Bring the knee forward of the forward leg. Okay. You can come up, turn the right hand up, and bring your forearm onto that right knee. So this is extended side angle pose. Sweep the arm up and over, spiral the hand, and feel like you're reaching, not just even from the hip. I said hip on the other side, but truly it's almost like from that back heel, pulling the spiral out from the heel, up the leg, from the hip, through the shoulder, through the arm to the fingertips. And you can be there, or if it's accessible, you can be here, or you can be flying. And then come up, and then we'll square. And just as a way of getting rid of any sort of hinkiness we've got in our hips, you can see we're in a wide-legged stance here. Let's actually bring ourselves down into a little bent knee position, and just a little side to side. Okay, so let's end with your version of a chair. Now we'll come into a resting position, but just to tie together the standing series, let's end where we started, which is sitting while standing up. Okay, so I'm actually going to lift my toes, place the big toes down, place the pinky toes down, place all the toes down, and then come into a teeny little chair here. And if this starts to become easy, try to work the knees back, try to work the bum back in space, and work the arms up. Whoa. And release. And then I'll invite you now, if you would like to take a prone, like a lying, or I should say supine, a lying shavasana, do that. If you would like to sit or stand in Tadasana, also fine. For me today, I'm going to sit right in this chair. I'm going to bring my legs up too. And just noticing how the practice, even though it may have, with all of the instructions and the explanation, and try it this way, try it that way, I can see that may not have felt maximally restful as we're going through, because you're paying attention and you're working and there's a lot going on. But notice the effect, the impact of the practice now that you're done, now that you're wrapping up. Really inhabiting your body again with breath. So this is where we integrate the practice. Taking this pause. See, this part of learning the yogis got it right. If we don't pause, we don't learn. So this is the body solidifying the muscle memory. This is the whole of our being. Taking in where we've been so that we can go there again. I'll leave you in a moment or two of silence here. You can just drop in and let it be. Can come to your heart. Actually, and just for no other reason that I feel like sharing this today, I'm gonna lead you in what for a long time I've done as a way of closing my practice, and it's integrating kind of connection and gratitude. So you can pick your own people. I'm gonna actually verbally, normally I do this internally, but I'm gonna do it out loud today. Okay? I bring my hands up, and with the backs of my thumbs, I tap my forehead. Okay, I guess traditionally in yoga practices would be like tapping into the third eye, center of intuition. And I turn my thoughts to a friend that I've lost. Actually, this is my dog. I do this every day. I think about Riley. Miss that guy. Just a little tap there. Then I bring my thumbs down to my lips and give it a little kiss. And that kiss is, in my case, for my partner. I'm sending her the good vibes. And then I drop my hands down in the back of my palms make contact with my heart, and I give myself 2 taps. Henry, Chloe, puppies that are, yep, they're still there right in front of me. Sending intuition, sending spirit, sending love, and however you choose to mark the practice, whether that is with namaste, or thank you, or rock on, yogis, or whatever it is, say that to yourself now. I will simply say thank you. Thanks for coming back out after several weeks where we haven't been together. How you feeling? What was your stupid human trick? During the practice? Oh, okay, because I was going to say... Oh. Sorry, I'm losing you, Dad. Just the... Oh, no. Oh, dear. You broke your butt. Is it... What's the... Oh, hold on, I'm just going to... Goodbye out there on the internet. I'm just going to stop the video just so we're not broadcasting a detailed diagnosis of broken butts. Hold on a second. Hold that thought. Bye, everyone.